Which nerve provides parasympathetic innervation to this gland? Gabby here from bootcamp.com, and here we're looking at a dissection along the suprahyoid region of the neck and underneath the areas of the mandible. So right over here is where we're going to be able to find the mandible, right? So all of these structures are going to be found inferior to it. And then right over here is where we're going to be able to see the hyoid bone. So all of these structures as well are going to be found within the suprahyoid region. So let's just identify some of the structures that are found here as well. Right over here, we can see the mylohyoid muscle, which forms the floor of the oral cavity. And we could also see more superficially to that, we can see both of the geniohyoid muscles. In this area as well, we're able to see a gland. So this right here is the submandibular gland, right? It's found underneath the mandible. Now, the submandibular gland is one of the three salivary glands that help produce digestive enzymes in saliva that will eventually be secreted into the mouth to allow us to chemically digest our food while we're chewing. So because salivation is a rest and digest or a parasympathetic function, these salivary glands, including the submandibular gland, need to receive specific parasympathetic innervation from nerves. Now, generally speaking, parasympathetic fibers actually hitch a ride with our cranial nerves. So in order to better understand the pathways of the parasympathetic innervation to the glands, I'd like us to actually refer to this diagram that we've created. So the parasympathetic fibers that go to innervate the salivary glands are going to hitch a ride and travel with the cranial nerves that are coming from the brain to the areas of the head and the neck. I want to direct your attention over here to the submandibular gland. So here's submandibular, here's parotid, and here's the sublingual gland. So those are the three of our salivary glands. So in order for us to understand the parasympathetic innervation to the submandibular gland, I want us to follow these blue fibers all the way up over here. So here we're going to be able to see the origination of those parasympathetic fibers or of those presynaptic fibers that will eventually travel to go and innervate that gland. So these fibers we can see here, as this label implies, this is going to represent the facial nerve. So the presynaptic sympathetic fibers are going to be carried out by the facial nerve, but more specifically, we see the facial nerve giving off a branch here. This is going to be the chorda tympani. So the chorda tympani emerges from the facial nerve within the ear, so within the middle ear, and eventually enters into the infratemporal fossa, where it will go ahead and join the lingual nerve. So this guy right here is a lingual nerve, and you can see how that chorda tympani, the fibers essentially just hitch a ride with that chorda tympani and with that lingual nerve. Eventually, those fibers will get to the tongue and eventually synapse within the submandibular ganglion. And then after the submandibular ganglion, those postsynaptic parasympathetic fibers can then go ahead to innervate the submandibular gland. Now, before I leave you off, I just want to briefly describe the parasympathetic innervation to the other two salivary glands just so you're familiar. So we also have the sublingual gland, which is found underneath the tongue, as the name implies, right? Sub, under, lingual tongue. So you can see here that the sublingual gland and the submandibular gland actually both receive the same parasympathetic innervation through the chorda tympani from the facial nerve. The parotid gland, however, is a little bit opposite in the sense that it receives its presynaptic parasympathetic fibers from the glossopharyngeal nerve, which eventually synapse in the otic ganglion within the infratemporal fossa, and then those postsynaptic parasympathetic fibers can travel with the auriculotemporal nerve to eventually go and innervate the parotid gland. So the auriculotemporal nerve is one of the nerves that comes off of our cranial nerve V3 or our mandibular branch of our trigeminal nerve within the infratemporal fossa. So now again, we looked at the submandibular gland here, and we mentioned that the submandibular and the sublingual glands are both going to receive parasympathetic innervation from the facial nerve, but more specifically through its branch, the chorda tympani.